Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we're going to step into the quiet, starlit world of history's greatest unsolved riddles. Settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift with me. You'll be traversing the frozen Siberian taiga and the dusty halls of ancient libraries, but don't worry, the only danger here is falling asleep before we reach the really good parts. Seriously, try not to. The last thing we need is you drooling on your pillow, dreaming of forgotten empires. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you right now, and maybe a little of that warm fuzzy feeling will travel through the ether and find its way to my end of the microphone. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. It's the early morning of June 30th, 1908. You're a local reindeer herder named Semyon, trudging through the vast, endless forests of central Siberia near the Podkamenaya Tunguska River. The air is cool and crisp, and the silence is so profound it's almost a physical presence. Then, a sudden blinding flash of light erupts in the sky to the northeast, so bright it feels like the sun just decided to show up for a second. An instant later, a colossal wave of heat washes over you, scorching your shirt and feeling like an oven door just swung open in your face. You're thrown to the ground, knocked unconscious by a thunderous boom that you feel more than you hear. It's like the world's loudest drum just got a good solid hit. When you finally come to, the ground is shaking with a second shockwave, and the air smells like ozone and burnt hair. You look around, and the world is wrong. The sky is full of dark, churning clouds, and the trees are on fire. You have no idea what just happened, and for decades neither would anyone else. This, my sleepy friend, is the Tunguska event, one of the most powerful and enigmatic explosions in modern history. The sheer scale of it is almost impossible to grasp. The blast had the force of 15 to 30 megatons of TNT. That's 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It flattened over 2,000 square kilometres of forest, an area larger than London. Approximately 80 million trees were toppled, their trunks all pointing outwards from a central point, like the bristles of a giant brush. Yet, and here's the mind-bending part, there was no crater. Nothing. Just a huge, flattened, charred patch of land in the middle of nowhere. For years, the event was largely forgotten. Siberia in the early 20th century wasn't exactly a hub of scientific inquiry, and the First World War and Russian Revolution soon consumed the world's attention. It wasn't until 1927, nearly 2 decades later, that the first scientific expedition, led by Soviet mineralogist Leonid Kulik, finally reached the remote site. Kulik expected to find a giant meteor crater, a deep, smoking bowl in the earth. Instead, he found only a vast expanse of devastation and trees snapped at their trunks, with a bizarre ring of still-standing but delimbed trees at the very epicenter. This peculiar detail, known as the telegraph poles, is a significant clue. It suggests that whatever hit the area didn't actually strike the ground with its full force. The prevailing theory, the one most scientists accept today, is that the Tunguska event was caused by an airburst from a meteoroid, or a comet. A large cosmic body, maybe 50 to 100 meters across, entered the Earth's atmosphere at a shallow angle. It heated up due to friction and, instead of hitting the ground, exploded a few kilometers above the surface. This would explain the lack of a crater. The shockwave would travel downwards, flattening everything below it, while the superheated air would radiate outward, causing the scorching. The energy would be so immense that it would vaporize the object itself, leaving behind no significant solid fragments. This is the mainstream historical fact of the matter, a cosmic airburst, a natural phenomenon of immense power. But where's the fun in a simple, straightforward explanation? The Tunguska event is a puzzle, and when you have a puzzle, you get some wonderfully weird and quirky fringe theories. One of the earliest and most persistent, championed by Russian science fiction writer Alexander Kazantsev, was that the blast wasn't a meteor at all, but a nuclear explosion. Kazantsev, a scientist by trade, suggested that an alien spaceship powered by a nuclear reactor experienced a catastrophic malfunction and blew up in mid-air. He pointed to a curious similarity between the Tunguska blast pattern and the effects of a nuclear bomb explosion, as well as the strange lack of meteorite debris. This idea, which took off in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, gave rise to a whole genre of science fiction, and still has a dedicated following of believers. It sounds far-fetched, I know, but you have to admit it's a good story. Another peculiar tidbit is the anecdotal evidence from locals. Eyewitnesses reported seeing not one, but multiple luminous objects streaking across the sky before the explosion. One woman, a witness named Kaya Nikiforova, claimed to have seen a ball of fire that was bigger than the moon. These accounts, while unreliable on their own, add another layer to the mystery. Were they seeing the main object breaking apart? Or something else entirely? A separate, slightly less out there theory suggests the culprit was a small, icy comet. A comet, being a snowball of rock and ice, would vaporize much more easily than a stony asteroid, which would neatly explain why no significant fragments have ever been found. The extreme heat of the event would simply turn the entire object into a gas cloud, and a few small, nondescript glassy spherules found in the soil are all that's left. Historians still argue whether the Tunguska event had any long-term effects on the planet besides the local devastation. Some have suggested that the dust and gas from the explosion may have subtly altered global weather patterns for a short time, while others have pointed to bizarre light phenomena reported across Europe and Russia for several nights after the event. Skies that were so bright you could read a newspaper at midnight. Was this caused by the upper atmosphere being filled with the cosmic dust from the explosion, or was it just a coincidence? The Tunguska event is a perfect little time capsule of a mystery. It happened in an era before satellites and global monitoring, so the only real evidence is what was left on the ground, and what a few terrified reindeer herders saw with their own eyes. It's a silent, baffling monument to a truly powerful unseen force, a reminder that we live on a cosmic shooting gallery, and sometimes a stray shot gets a little too close for comfort. So, as you lay there in the dark, think about that desolate, treeless plain in Siberia. Think of the blast that knocked a man over 100 kilometres away off his feet. And remember that the next time you see a shooting star, it could be a warning. Or it could just be a rock. Who knows? That's the beauty of it, isn't it? The not knowing. Good evening. We've just emerged from the icy, charred silence of the Tunguska event. A mystery that, for all its power, left behind a strange emptiness. Now let's travel much further back in time to a place of sunshine and ancient whispers. Imagine you're standing on the Greek island of Crete, roughly 3,700 years ago. The sun is warm on your skin, and the salty breeze carries the scent of wild thyme. You're a potter, a craftsman, and you hear the tales of the great palace of Phaistos, a labyrinth of a place filled with bustling people and incredible art. Now, fast forward to the year 1908, the same year as the Tunguska blast, funnily enough. An Italian archaeologist named Luigi Pernier is excavating a Minoan palace at Phaistos. It's a painstaking process, but the work is yielding treasures: pottery, tools, frescoes. Then, in the basement of a room that scholars believe was used for official documents and archives, they find something truly unique. A small circular disc of fired clay, about 15 centimetres in diameter and just over 2 centimetres thick. It's a little lopsided, not a perfect circle, but what's really striking is what's on it. Both sides are covered in a spiral of stamped hieroglyphs. This is the Phaistos disc. It's not just a piece of pottery, it's a tangible physical riddle, a relic that has baffled the sharpest minds for over a century. It's a single, solitary artifact. No other object like it has ever been found. The symbols on it are not the standard hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. There are 45 distinct signs in total, and they appear to have been pressed into the clay with individual stamps while it was still soft, an early form of movable type printing. Think of it, a kind of prehistoric printing press, 1,000 years before the Gutenberg Bible. This makes the disc not only a linguistic mystery, but a technological anomaly as well. The hieroglyphs themselves are a hodgepodge of familiar and completely alien images. You can make out a man's head with a feathered headdress, a cat, a fish, a bird in flight, a shield, a ship, and even a child. There are 241 symbols in all, arranged in groups separated by small vertical lines. The spiral starts at the edge and winds inward to the centre. So, which way do you read it? From the outside in, or the inside out? And what on earth does it say? The sheer number of theories proposed for the disc's meaning and origin is astounding. Some scholars, like linguist Arthur Evans, who also excavated the Palace of Knossos, believed it was a Minoan script, but different from others found on the island, such as Linear A. Others have suggested it's a prayer, a magical spell, a list of soldiers, a calendar, a board game, or even a fake. The debate is still raging with very little consensus. A single mainstream fact about it is that it's a genuine Minoan artifact dated to the Middle Minoan period, roughly 1850 to 1600 BC. The context of its discovery in a well-dated archaeological layer makes its authenticity beyond doubt. One of the quirkier ideas about the Phaistos disk came from Greek-American linguist Cyrus H. Gordon, who proposed that the script was actually Semitic, possibly related to ancient Phoenician or Ugaritic languages. He attempted to decipher it as a text related to a ritual chant or a religious invocation, but his work was met with skepticism and never gained widespread acceptance. The core problem, as with all these attempts, is the small sample size. You have a few hundred symbols but no known language to compare them to, no Rosetta Stone. Imagine trying to learn English by only having a single page of a book and a dictionary filled with pictures. It would be nearly impossible. This brings us to one of the open scholarly debates. Historians still argue whether the script represents a syllabary, an alphabet, or something else entirely. A syllabary, for example, uses symbols to represent syllables, like bar, be, by, while an alphabet uses them to represent individual sounds, like ba. The Phaistos disk has 45 unique symbols, which is too many for a simple alphabet, but too few for a true logographic system like Egyptian hieroglyphs, where each symbol represents a word or concept. This middle ground makes decipherment so difficult. The lack of a parallel text, a key to deciphering ancient scripts like Linear B, means that every proposed solution is, essentially, a shot in the dark. Think for a moment about the people who made this disk. Why did they go to such trouble? The unique movable type printing method suggests it was either a one-off curiosity or part of a larger lost collection. If it was part of a collection, where are the others? Were they destroyed? Lost to the sands of time? Or did this civilization, for some reason, just stop using this innovative technology? This leads to a rather quirky or fringe tidbit. A few researchers have suggested the Phaistos disk is an elaborate hoax. They claim it was forged by Luigi Pernier himself, or by one of his assistants, perhaps inspired by other Minoan artifacts to create something sensational. However, this theory is largely discredited by modern forensic analysis and the fact that the clay and its firing methods are consistent with other Minoan artifacts from the same site. What's really fascinating about the Phaistos disk is not what it says, but what it represents. A glimpse into a mind, a culture, and a lost history. It's a silent conversation starter that has persisted for millennia. It reminds us that for all our advancements, we still walk on a planet littered with stories we can't read, jokes we can't get, and secrets we'll never fully understand. Remember that feeling of being a herder under a blank sky, with a sound that could shatter the world? Now imagine being an archaeologist holding this small, cool, hand-sized disc, a puzzle box that has refused to open for 100 years. It's a humbling feeling. It makes you realise that even in our most connected, information-rich world, some of the most basic questions about our past remain unanswered. The Phaistos disk is a physical monument to the limits of our knowledge. It tells us that ancient civilizations were far more sophisticated than we often give them credit for. They had their own ideas, their own stories, and their own methods of communication. And while we may be able to piece together fragments of their pottery and their palaces, the heart of their culture, their very words, may be lost to us forever. And maybe that's okay. It's a good reminder that not everything needs to be solved. Sometimes, the mystery itself is the most precious thing we can find. So, as you drift off, let the thought of this ancient puzzle settle in your mind, a spiral of symbols, a whisper from the past waiting for someone somewhere to finally crack the code. Welcome back to the quiet glow of your screen, where we trade one mystery for another. We've gone from a cosmic puzzle to a linguistic one, and now we turn our attention to the cold, hard reality of military history, a reality that, in this case, simply vanished into thin air. Picture yourself in the 1st century AD. You're a young Roman soldier, a fresh recruit, trudging through the mud and mist of Britannia. The year is around 117 AD, and you are part of the mighty 9th Hispana Legion, a crack unit with a fearsome reputation forged in the crucible of battle. You've heard the stories, They fought in the Gallic Wars, served under Caesar, and helped conquer Spain. Now you're here, on the very edge of the known world, trying to subdue the painted, rebellious tribes of the north. Life is tough. The weather is miserable. You're homesick for the sunny climes of Italy. And as you march north, you feel a growing sense of unease. You hear whispers of fierce, unyielding tribes beyond the frontier, a place the Romans call Caledonia. But then one day, your legion is simply gone. Not defeated, not disbanded, just vanished from the historical record, leaving behind nothing but a gaping hole. This, my friend, is the story of the 9th Hispana Legion, one of the most famous and enduring military mysteries of the ancient world. They were one of the original legions of the Roman Empire, a cornerstone of its military might. They were known to have been stationed at a fortress called Eboracum, which we now know as the modern city of York. But sometime after 108 AD, when they are last definitively recorded in Britain, all mention of them in historical texts and inscriptions simply ceases. The 9th Legion is, for all intents and purposes, a ghost. The last we hear of them with certainty is in 108 AD, when they are listed as working on the fortress at Eboracum. After that, they disappear. We know that by 122 AD, when the famous Hadrian's Wall was being built, another legion, the 6th Victrix, had taken their place. The gap is small, only about 14 years, but in the meticulously kept records of the Roman military, it is a significant, baffling void. So, what happened to 5,000 hardened professional soldiers, their officers, their support staff and their standards, the sacred eagles that were the soul of the legion? For centuries, the popular historical narrative was that the entire legion was annihilated in a single, devastating battle in northern Britain. This is the version most of us know from movies and books, like Rosemary Sutcliffe's novel, The Eagle of the Ninth. The idea is that they marched into the wilds of Scotland, were ambushed and overwhelmed by a massive barbarian force, and every single man was killed. It's a dramatic, epic tale of Roman hubris and defeat. It's also, unfortunately, a theory with very little actual historical evidence to back it up. A mainstream fact we have is that the legion's disappearance coincides with a period of unrest and conflict in northern Britain, a time when the Roman grip on the frontier was tenuous at best. We know there were massive rebellions, but whether one was large enough to wipe out an entire legion is the central question. A major reason why this theory gained so much traction is the complete lack of any records of the legion's transfer to another part of the empire. Roman legions were constantly on the move, and their movements were well documented. If the 9th had been sent to, say, the Danube or the East, there should be inscriptions, papyri, or other evidence of their presence, but there is nothing. So, historians still argue whether the 9th Legion was destroyed in battle, or simply disbanded and absorbed into other units. This debate is at the very heart of the mystery. If they were destroyed, why is there no record of such a catastrophic military disaster? The Romans were masters of propaganda, but they were also meticulous record keepers. A loss on this scale would have been a national tragedy, and would almost certainly have been mentioned somewhere. This brings us to a few quirky or fringe tidbits. Some historians have pointed to a record of a detachment of the 9th Legion, not the whole legion, but a few small groups, being stationed in the Netherlands and on the Danube frontier after 120 AD. There is even a gravestone found in the Netherlands for a soldier named Lucius Clodius Macer, a centurion of the 9th Hispana who died in the area. This is a perplexing piece of evidence. It suggests that at least some part of the legion survived or was transferred. Was the main body destroyed and a few small detachments lived on? Or did the entire legion get quietly, unceremoniously transferred, and the lack of a paper trail is just a fluke? This idea is less dramatic, but perhaps more plausible. It would mean that a legion whose name was a source of pride was simply dissolved, its soldiers reassigned to other legions, perhaps as a form of punishment or to make up for losses in a different campaign. The legion's number, the sacred 9th, would have been quietly retired, its memory fading into the mists of history. Another interesting side note is the Roman practice of damnatio memoriae, a form of historical erasure where a person's name and legacy were struck from all records. Could the 9th Legion have suffered such a fate? Perhaps they were disgraced in a battle or committed some act of insubordination so egregious that their very existence was wiped from official history. This is a far-fetched but intriguing possibility. A more practical explanation, and the one that is currently gaining favour among scholars, is that the legion was simply transferred to the east, likely to Judea or one of the Mesopotamian provinces, where they were annihilated in one of the many bloody and undocumented wars in the region. There are some sparse records of a 9th Legion in the east, but they are highly disputed and could be referring to another unit. The truth is, we just don't know for sure. The silence is deafening. Think about it. An entire army of men, trained, armed, and ready for war, just ceases to exist in the collective memory of an empire that built a colossal network of roads, fortresses, and aqueducts. The story of the 9th Legion is a powerful reminder that history is not a complete unbroken tapestry. It's a series of fragments, with huge, terrifying holes in between. We have all the pieces of their existence up to a certain point, and then, poof, they're gone. It's a mystery that has captivated writers and historians for over a century. The romantic notion of a brave legion fighting to the last man against overwhelming odds will likely always be the most popular version of the story. It makes for a great book. But the more mundane, and perhaps more likely reality, is a silent disbandment, a quiet reassignment, or a loss in a faraway land that simply didn't make the cut for the Roman historical record. It's a sobering thought, that for all your might, for all your glory, you can still be forgotten, your entire legacy reduced to a question mark on a dusty map. We've been on a journey through history, from the thunderous silence of a cosmic blast to the quiet disappearance of an army. Now, let's leave the world of physical mysteries and delve into something far more intimate, far more perplexing. A book. Not just any book, but one that has been called the world's most mysterious manuscript. Imagine you're a rare book collector in the early 20th century, a man named Wilfrid Voynich. You're sifting through an old library at a Jesuit college in Italy in 1912, a place filled with dusty tomes and forgotten secrets. You're looking for hidden gems, and you find one tucked away among some mundane historical documents. It's a book, a small codex bound in vellum, written on animal hide. It's about 240 pages long, and it's filled with beautiful, intricate illustrations of plants, strange astronomical charts, and what appear to be tiny nymphs bathing in a network of pipes. And then you realise the text is unlike anything you have ever seen. This is the Voynich manuscript, a masterpiece of cryptographic and linguistic head-scratching that has baffled cryptographers, linguists, and historians for over a century. The manuscript is a true historical fact, a physical object that exists and can be held and examined. Its authenticity is without question. Radiocarbon dating of the vellum puts its creation sometime between 1404 and 1438. The problem isn't whether it's real, it's what on earth it says. The book is divided into distinct sections, each with a different theme. The herbal section contains illustrations of plants that, for the most part, do not correspond to any known species on Earth. Then there's the astronomical section, with its strange diagrams of stars and constellations that don't match our celestial maps. The biological section shows the nude bathing nymphs and their pipe-like contraptions, and finally the cosmological and pharmaceutical sections contain more symbols and drawings of vials and roots. The drawings themselves are beautiful, drawn with a meticulous hand, and the text that accompanies them is neat, flowing, and clearly the work of a professional scribe. But the language itself, it's a total enigma. It's a flowing script, written from left to right, but it uses no known alphabet or system of characters. It has its own internal rules, a consistent structure, and a certain rhythm. It's not gibberish. Statistical analysis of the text reveals patterns that are similar to those found in real human languages. The word lengths, the frequency of certain characters, and the structure of the sentences all suggest that this is a genuine language, not a random collection of nonsense. The letters are a mix of familiar shapes and completely unique, abstract symbols. The words are structured in a way that suggests a phonetic script, a system where each symbol represents a sound. So, if it's a real language, why can't we read it? This is where the open scholarly debate comes in. Historians and cryptographers still argue whether the manuscript is written in a real, but lost language, or if it's a form of steganography or a cipher. A cipher is a code, a way of scrambling a message so that it can only be read by someone with the key. During the Renaissance, when the Voynich manuscript was likely created, ciphers were a popular way to send secret messages. The problem is that no one, not even the world's best codebreakers, has been able to crack it. The American cryptanalyst William F. Friedman, who broke the Japanese Purple Code during World War II, spent decades on the Voynich manuscript and came up with nothing. There have been countless attempts at decipherment. Some have suggested it's a simple substitution cipher, where each Voynich character stands for a letter in a known alphabet. But this theory falls apart when you try it. Others have suggested it's a more complex transposition cipher, where the letters are rearranged in a certain order. This hasn't worked either. Some believe it's a polyalphabetic cipher, where the key changes throughout the text, a method made popular in the Renaissance. Even with modern computers, no one has been able to find a consistent key. This brings us to the more quirky and fringe tidbits. Some have suggested the entire manuscript is a sophisticated hoax, a well-made forgery created to bilk an unsuspecting collector. This theory gained some traction, but the radiocarbon dating and the sheer complexity of the text make it seem unlikely. It would be a monumental effort for someone in the early 15th century to create such a thing just for a joke. Another fascinating theory is that the manuscript is an example of glossolalia, a form of speaking in tongues, where the writer was simply channeling a series of sounds and writing them down without understanding their meaning. This is a very creative idea, but it's hard to reconcile with the consistent structure and patterns found in the text. There's a beautiful, but unproven, idea that it's a record of an extraterrestrial language, brought here by aliens and somehow lost in time. It sounds crazy, I know, but when you look at the weird plants and the celestial charts that don't match any stars we know, you have to admit it's a fun thought. The mainstream historical fact is that we know very little about its origin. It's named after Wilfrid Voynich, but its history before he acquired it is a murky trail of famous scholars and emperors who also couldn't read it. We know it was once owned by the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, a known collector of oddities who paid a high price for it. He in turn passed it on to others, all of whom failed to understand it. The manuscript has always been a puzzle, passed from one frustrated owner to the next. The Voynich manuscript is a humbling reminder that even with all our technology and all our brain power, some mysteries are so deeply buried that they may never be solved. It's a beautifully crafted book of secrets, and it seems determined to keep them. It sits in a vault at Yale University, a silent sentinel to a lost language or a forgotten code. When you look at its pages, you can almost feel the presence of the person who wrote it, their hand moving across the vellum, creating a document that would confound and fascinate people for centuries. Was the creator a genius cryptographer, a deranged mystic, or a bored medieval scholar with a wicked sense of humour? We may never know. The Voynich manuscript is a beautiful, maddening, and profoundly human mystery. It reminds us that there are still frontiers of knowledge waiting to be explored, not out in space, but right here, in the pages of a small, fragile book. We've moved from cosmic bangs and ancient clay to a book that refuses to be read. Now let's talk about a more modern puzzle, a monument to a mystery that, until recently, stood in plain sight. Imagine you're driving through the quiet, rolling hills of Elbert County, Georgia. It's a peaceful landscape of farms and forests, a place you wouldn't expect to find something monumental. But then you crest a hill, and there it is. A giant granite structure that looks like something out of a futuristic movie. It's the Georgia Guidestones, and until they were destroyed in 2022, they were one of the most perplexing and controversial monuments in America. The Guidestones were a set of 4 enormous granite slabs arranged around a central pillar with another capstone resting on top. The whole thing weighed over 237,000 pounds and stood nearly 20 feet tall. This is a mainstream historical fact. The stones were real, they were massive, and they were built in 1980. The slabs were inscribed with a set of 10 guidelines for humanity, a series of cryptic commandments for a new age. And the most baffling part? No one knows for sure who commissioned them. The story begins in June 1979, when a well-dressed man using the pseudonym R.C. Christian walked into the offices of the Elberton Granite Finishing Company. He told the company's president, Joe Fendley, that he represented a group of anonymous individuals who wanted to build a monument. He laid out the plans for the colossal structure and paid for the entire thing in cash. The man was impeccably polite and knowledgeable, and he explained that the group wanted to leave a message for future generations, a kind of modern-day Rosetta Stone that would survive the ages. The 10 guidelines, which were inscribed in 8 different modern languages, English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese and Russian, and 4 ancient languages, Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit and Egyptian hieroglyphs, on the capstone were both aspirational and deeply unsettling. The first one, for example, read, "Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature." The others included suggestions for a new living language, for ruling passion and faith with reason, and for avoiding petty laws and useless officials. The overall message seemed to be a blueprint for a new, peaceful and sustainable world after some kind of global catastrophe. It was a strange mix of utopian ideals and a kind of chilling, depopulation-based philosophy that sent a shiver down many people's spines. The identity of R.C. Christian and the group he represented is the central mystery. Fendley, the man who built the stones, was the only one who met Christian, and he swore he would take the secret to his grave. He never revealed Christian's real name. The only clues we have are the name itself, R.C. Christian, which is a reference to the Rosicrucians, a mystical and philosophical secret society, and a book published by the same name that outlines some of the ideas behind the monument. Was R.C. Christian a single person or an organisation, a wealthy benefactor or a shadowy cabal? The fact that no one ever came forward to take credit for the guide stones is a big part of the puzzle. The project required significant resources, and yet the creators were content to remain completely anonymous. Historians still argue whether the guide stones were a harmless, eccentric art project, or a more sinister call to action. For many, they were just a weird piece of roadside Americana, a strange monument with a strange message. But for others, especially those in the growing online conspiracy communities, the stones were a symbol of a shadowy New World Order, a group of powerful elites planning to reduce the world's population and enslave the survivors. The first guideline in particular, with its call to maintain humanity under 500 million, was seen as evidence of a global depopulation agenda. For decades, the stones attracted both curious tourists and angry activists who defaced them with graffiti like "Death to the New World Order" and "I am the Lord." This dual nature, part oddity, part lightning rod for controversy, was a huge part of their allure. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the guide stones were also a functional astronomical device. They had several carefully engineered features. The capstone had a hole drilled through it that aligned with the North Star Polaris all year round. The central pillar had a slot cut into it that aligned with the sun's solstices and equinoxes, and a hole drilled through the capstone allowed a sunbeam to pass through at noon each day, landing on the centre stone to mark the time of day and the day of the year. This showed a surprising level of engineering and thought, far beyond a simple art project. It suggested a group with an understanding of astronomy and a desire for their monument to stand the test of time, to be a kind of cosmic clock for a civilization to come. The mainstream historical fact is that the monument's existence led to a great deal of public debate and protest, culminating in its destruction on July 6, 2022. An explosion shattered the capstone and one of the upright slabs. Surveillance footage showed a vehicle driving away after the blast, but no one was ever arrested for the act. The remaining stones were later taken down by authorities for safety reasons. The mystery of their creator remains unsolved, and now so does the mystery of their destruction. The stones are no longer there, and all that's left is a concrete slab and a very strange story. As you close your eyes, think about that weird piece of granite in the Georgia countryside. Think about the man who called himself R.C. Christian, who appeared out of nowhere, paid for this thing in cash, and then vanished. Was he a dreamer? A cult leader? A wealthy recluse? The guide stones were a physical embodiment of a grand, unsettling idea, and they stood there for over 40 years, silently asking us if we were worthy of survival. And now, they're gone, a victim of the very chaos they were designed to prevent. The Georgia guide stones are a modern riddle, a physical manifestation of a question mark. They challenge us to think about our future, our population, and our place in the world. And they remind us that sometimes the biggest mysteries aren't found in a lost manuscript or an ancient battlefield, but in a small-town granite quarry, a quiet place where someone, somewhere, tried to leave a message for all of humanity. And then, just as mysteriously, that message was silenced. We've explored modern mysteries etched in granite, a book of secrets that won't be read, and an entire army that just disappeared. Now let's turn our attention to a vast and mostly uncharted frontier, the bottom of the ocean. Imagine you're on a boat in the Baltic Sea, a chilly, brackish body of water in northern Europe. It's the summer of 2011, and you're part of a Swedish ocean survey team called Ocean X, a group of treasure hunters and explorers who specialise in finding shipwrecks and other submerged artefacts. You're using sonar equipment to scan the seabed, a tedious process of mapping the contours of the deep. Then, the sonar screen lights up with something completely unexpected, a perfectly circular object about 60 metres in diameter, with strange symmetrical features that don't look natural at all. This is the Baltic Sea Anomaly. It's a massive disc-shaped formation sitting at the bottom of the sea, roughly 87 metres down. This is the first mainstream historical fact about it. It was discovered by professional oceanographers using advanced technology, and its existence is not in dispute. The controversy, as you can imagine, is not what it is, but what it's made of and what it's doing there. The initial sonar images were incredible. The object looked like a giant flying saucer that had crash-landed on the seafloor. It had a long 300-metre track leading up to it, as if it had skidded along the bottom before coming to a stop. It also appeared to have a staircase-like formation on one side, and what looked like a dome, with a series of smaller structures around it. These images instantly sparked a worldwide media frenzy and a flood of speculation. Was it a sunken UFO? An ancient submerged city? A new kind of natural geological formation? The Ocean X team eventually mounted an expedition to get a closer look. They sent a remote-controlled camera down to the site, and what they found was even more perplexing. The object was not perfectly round, but more of a flattened circular shape, with straight lines and right angles. The divers reported that the surface was covered in a soot-like material, and that some of the rocks around it looked like they had been melted. They also said that their electronic equipment, their satellite phones, cameras, and even some of the diving equipment, stopped working when they got within a certain distance of the object, only to start working again when they swam away. This quirky or fringe tidbit of electronic interference is one of the most cited pieces of evidence by those who believe the anomaly is extraterrestrial in origin. The leading scientific explanation is much more mundane, but still pretty interesting. Many geologists and oceanographers believe the Baltic Sea Anomaly is a glacial deposit. A large circular rock formation, perhaps a boulder or a volcanic rock, was likely carried and deposited by a glacier during the last ice age, a process that created much of the Baltic Sea's landscape. The skid mark could be a natural depression in the seafloor, and the straight lines and angles could be the result of natural fractures in the rock. The alleged electronic interference could have been a coincidence or a faulty piece of equipment. The soot-like material could be manganese or iron deposits, which are common on the seafloor. This theory, while less exciting than a crashed spaceship, is the most scientifically sound, and it explains most of the physical features without resorting to the supernatural. However, historians and geologists still argue whether the anomaly is a natural formation or a man-made structure. This is the key debate. If it's a man-made structure, who built it? And why? And how? The Baltic Sea was a different place thousands of years ago, a time when land that is now submerged was dry and habitable. Could the anomaly be the ruins of a prehistoric city or temple that was later submerged? The lack of any other nearby ruins or artefacts makes this unlikely, but it's not impossible. The staircase and dome are also difficult to explain as natural rock formations. The Baltic Sea is a treacherous place for divers, and the frigid water and low visibility make it difficult to get a clear picture of the anomaly. The Ocean X team has not been able to raise any part of it to the surface, and they have been met with a great deal of scepticism from the wider scientific community. Some have accused them of sensationalizing the find to attract more funding and publicity. Whether that's true or not, the mystery remains. The lack of a conclusive scientific expedition to definitively identify the object leaves the door open for all sorts of wild theories. Think about it for a moment. Something massive, strange, and completely out of place is sitting at the bottom of the ocean, and we have no idea what it is. The fact that we have more detailed images of the surface of Mars than we do of our own seafloor is a humbling reality. The oceans are the last unexplored frontier on Earth, a place where anything is possible. The Baltic Sea Anomaly is a perfect reminder of that. It's a silent sentinel, a circular riddle that sits in the cold, dark water, waiting for a definitive answer that may never come. Is it a rock, or is it something more? We'll probably never know for sure unless we can mount a full-scale archaeological expedition to the site. And even then, what if the answer is just as baffling as the question? What if it's not a ship and it's not a rock, but something so strange and so alien that we can't even categorize it. The most important thing it tells us is that we should never stop looking, never stop being curious, and never stop believing that there might be something truly bizarre and wonderful waiting for us, just out of sight. From the depths of the ocean, we now ascend to the wide-open expanse of the sky, where a different kind of vanishing act took place. Settle in and imagine yourself in the summer of 1937. You're following the news of a daring aviator, a woman with a wide grin and a steely resolve. Her name is Amelia Earhart. She's a global celebrity, a fashion icon, and a pioneer of the skies. She's already been the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic, and now she's attempting something even more audacious, a flight around the world. She and her navigator, Fred Noonan, are in the final, most dangerous leg of their journey, a daunting 2,556-mile hop over the vast, unforgiving Pacific Ocean from Lae, New Guinea, to a small, isolated coral atoll called Howland Island. The flight begins on July 2nd, 1937, and for a while, all goes as planned. The two-engine Lockheed Electra 10E takes off and heads east, but as they near Howland Island, things start to go wrong. The weather is overcast, and the radio signals from the US Coast Guard cutter Itasca, which is waiting to guide them in, are intermittent and unclear. The final garbled message from Earhart's plane is a heartbreaking, haunting one. "We are on the line 157337. We are running north and south." And then, silence. A radio operator on the Itasca reports hearing a faint final transmission. "I'm on a ridge but can't see anything. I need to get out of here, but I don't know where I am." That's it. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan, along with their plane, simply disappeared over the vastness of the Pacific. The search that followed was one of the most extensive and expensive in naval history. The US Navy and Coast Guard spent millions of dollars scouring 250,000 square miles of ocean. They found nothing. No wreckage, no oil slick, no life raft, not a single piece of debris. This is the central, unshakable mainstream historical fact of the case. A famous person and her navigator vanished without a trace, and a massive search failed to find them. The lack of a definitive outcome has fueled a cottage industry of theories, each more compelling than the last. The simplest and most widely accepted theory is that they simply crashed and sank into the ocean. Perhaps they ran out of fuel, or the engines failed, or they were lost in a storm. The plane, being heavy and with limited flotation, would have sunk to the bottom, where the immense pressure and a lack of light would have preserved it, or more likely crushed and scattered it. This explanation is the most plausible, and is the one that is officially sanctioned by most historical organisations. The Pacific Ocean is a big place, and a small plane would be very difficult to find, especially with the limited technology of the 1930s. But where's the fun in that? The lack of evidence has opened the door to a plethora of quirky or fringe tidbits. One of the most popular is the castaway theory, championed by the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIGHAR. They have spent decades investigating the possibility that Earhart and Noonan didn't crash into the ocean, but instead made a successful emergency landing on a remote uninhabited coral atoll called Nikumaroro, part of the Phoenix Islands. The atoll is on the line of position Earhart reported in her final transmission. TIGHAR's expeditions have found intriguing evidence, including artefacts that could be from Earhart's plane, such as a bottle, a piece of plexiglass and a zipper. They even found a partial human skeleton on the island in 1940, and modern forensic analysis of the bones suggests they belong to a woman of Earhart's height and ethnic background. This is a fascinating theory that turns the traditional narrative on its head. It suggests they survived the flight, only to die a slow and lonely death as castaways on a deserted island. Another, more sensational theory is the captured theory. This one posits that Earhart and Noonan were on a secret spy mission for the US government, gathering intelligence on Japanese military installations in the Pacific. They were shot down or captured by the Japanese, imprisoned, and later executed. The US government then covered up the incident to avoid a diplomatic crisis. This theory is largely dismissed by historians due to a lack of credible evidence, but it persists, fueled by a few blurry photographs and a desire for a more exciting conspiratorial explanation. It taps into that classic spy thriller trope and makes the case a whole lot more thrilling. And of course, there's the truly outlandish. Some have suggested that the pair were abducted by aliens, or that they entered a time warp. These theories are not taken seriously by historians or scientists, but they do show the extent to which the human mind will go to fill in a void. The open scholarly debate in all this is, historians still argue whether Earhart's disappearance was a simple tragic accident or a more complex unresolved mystery. The sheer volume of competing theories and the ongoing passionate debates among experts prove that the case is far from closed. The central question is not so much what happened, as it is which theory has the most compelling evidence. And for now, there is no single answer that satisfies everyone. Think about the silence after that final transmission. The quiet drone of the plane as it flew on, low on fuel, over the endless dark ocean. Imagine the two people inside, Amelia and Fred, desperately trying to find a signal, a speck of land, a sign of life. Their story is a powerful reminder of the romance and the danger of exploration, and the ultimate fragility of human life in the face of nature's vast, unyielding power. Amelia Earhart's disappearance has become a legend, a modern myth, and a testament to the enduring power of an unsolved mystery. It's a tale that teaches us about human ambition and the limits of technology. It's a tragedy, to be sure, but it's also a powerful symbol of a pioneering spirit that refused to be grounded. And so, as you drift off to sleep, let the image of a small plane flying over a wide, dark ocean, alone, and searching for a home that it would never find, settle in your mind. We've flown the friendly, and not so friendly skies with Amelia Earhart. A story that vanished with the last radio signal. Now, let's go back in time, to a place where a whole settlement of people disappeared, leaving behind only one cryptic clue. Settle in, and let your mind travel to the year 1587. You're a member of a group of English colonists, and you've just made a long, perilous journey across the Atlantic. Your destination is Roanoke Island, a barrier island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Your leader is John White, and your goal is to establish a new settlement in the name of Queen Elizabeth I. You build houses, plant crops, and forge uneasy alliances with the local Native American tribes. For a while, it feels like the future is bright. But supplies run low, and a few months later, John White sails back to England to get more provisions and more people. He leaves behind 115 colonists, including his own daughter, Eleanor Dare, and his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. He promises to return soon. The year is 1588, and a massive war is brewing. The Spanish Armada is preparing to invade England, and all available ships are commandeered for the war effort. White is stuck in England for 3 long, agonising years. When he finally returns to Roanoke Island in 1590, he finds the settlement deserted. No people, no signs of a struggle, no bodies. The houses have been dismantled and a high palisade has been built around the village, a strange act for people who are supposed to be waiting for a rescue. The only clue is a single word, Croatoan, carved into a post on the palisade, and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree. This is the central, unshakable mainstream fact of the Roanoke colony mystery. 115 colonists vanished, leaving behind a single, baffling word. White had given the colonists a prearranged signal. If they were to move the settlement for any reason, they were to carve the name of their new destination into a tree. If they were in danger or had been attacked, they were to carve a cross above the word. There was no cross. This, to White, was a sign that they had not been in immediate danger and had simply relocated to Croatoan, a nearby island inhabited by a friendly Native American tribe. He was a man of his word and a father desperate to find his family, so he tried to go to Croatoan. But a storm blew up. The ship's captains refused to go on, and White was forced to return to England, never to see his family again. For centuries, the fate of the Roanoke colonists has been a subject of intense historical and archaeological debate. The simplest and most widely accepted theory is that they did exactly what the word said. They relocated to Croatoan Island, now called Hatteras Island, and assimilated with the Croatoan tribe. This is supported by later reports from English explorers who heard tales of light-skinned people with grey eyes living among the Native Americans in the area. A quirky or fringe tidbit from this theory is the discovery of what is known as the Dare Stones. These are a series of carved stones that were supposedly found in the area, detailing Virginia Dare's life and eventual death. but they have been widely debunked as a 20th century hoax. Still, the legend persists. The assimilation theory is further supported by the genetic evidence. A modern DNA study of people with the last name Lumbee, a Native American tribe in North Carolina, has found some shared DNA with English families from the same time period. This is not a definitive link, but it's a tantalizing piece of evidence that suggests a blending of cultures. The idea is that the colonists, starving and without hope of a rescue, simply decided to join forces with the friendly Native Americans. This would explain the lack of any struggle, and it's a much more optimistic ending than the other theories. However, historians still argue whether the colonists were assimilated by a local tribe or were wiped out by a different hostile group. There were other tribes in the area who were not friendly to the English, and it's entirely possible that they saw the colonists as a threat and wiped them out. The lack of any bodies, however, is a major sticking point. Why would they attack and kill everyone, but leave no trace of the event? It's a question that has no good answer. Another fascinating and deeply disturbing theory is that the colonists tried to return to England but were lost at sea, or that they were victims of a disease or famine that wiped them out. But again, the evidence of the dismantled houses and the palisade, and the perfectly carved word, suggests that they had time to plan and execute a move. This was not a panicked, last-ditch effort. The Roanoke mystery is a powerful reminder of how fragile early colonial life was. These people were on their own, a tiny speck of English civilization on a vast, wild continent. Their fate was in the hands of the weather, the local tribes, and the whims of a king across the ocean. John White's return in 1590, and the heartbreak he must have felt, is a poignant part of the story. He left a hopeful settlement and returned to a quiet, empty ghost town, a testament to a failed dream. The Roanoke colony has become a cultural touchstone, a warning to those who would venture into the unknown without a backup plan. It's a ghost story that has been told and retold for centuries, and it reminds us that for every successful, triumphant moment in history, there are countless failures, countless dreams that simply vanished into the mist of time. So, as you drift off, think about those 115 men, women and children. Think about the quiet, empty houses, the carefully carved word and the endless silence of a lost colony, and wonder, just for a moment, if they were truly lost, or if they just found a new home among new friends, a new life in the new world that they had only dreamed of. From a lost colony to a city that may have never existed, we continue our journey into the realm of the unknown. We've seen an entire population disappear, and now we confront the possibility of a civilization that sank into the sea in a single day and night. Settle back, close your eyes, and let your mind drift to the world of myth and legend. The story of Atlantis comes to us from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote about it in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, around 360 BC. He described it not as a fictional place, but as a real, historical city that had been destroyed thousands of years earlier. According to Plato, Atlantis was a vast, technologically advanced island civilization located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is what the ancients called the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a utopian society of immense wealth and power, with magnificent palaces, temples, and a system of concentric rings of land and water that formed a perfect, defensible city. The Atlanteans were a virtuous and noble people, but they grew corrupted by their own power and greed. The gods, angered by their hubris, decided to punish them. In a single, cataclysmic day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island of Atlantis sank into the sea, swallowed whole by the ocean, never to be seen again. This is the central, unshakable, mainstream fact of the Atlantis story. It originates with Plato. He is the first and only ancient source to describe it in such detail. The question is, was he writing about a real place? Or was he using the story as a philosophical tool to illustrate his ideas about ideal states and the dangers of moral decay? Plato's dialogues are often allegorical, and many scholars believe this is simply a moral tale, a cautionary legend he invented to make a point about the perfect society. However, the idea of a lost, highly advanced civilization has captivated the human imagination for centuries. The search for the lost city has been relentless, with countless books, documentaries, and expeditions dedicated to finding its ruins. Over the years, countless locations have been proposed as the true site of Atlantis. Some have suggested it was located in the Mediterranean, perhaps near the volcanic island of Thera, which was destroyed by a massive eruption around 1600 BC. Others have looked to the Azores, the Canary Islands, or even Antarctica. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the theory, championed by some, that the Atlantis story is a memory of an ancient pre-flood civilization that was destroyed by a global cataclysm. This idea connects the Atlantis myth to other flood myths from around the world, suggesting a shared global memory of a lost world. The problem with all these theories is the lack of any definitive archaeological evidence. No one has ever found a sunken city that matches Plato's description. No one has found any artifacts, no inscriptions, no smoking gun that would prove Atlantis was real. This is the central problem that prevents the story from being anything more than a myth. This brings us to the open scholarly debate. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether Plato's story of Atlantis was a historical account or a philosophical allegory. The consensus in the academic community is that it's an allegory. Plato's work is full of invented stories and characters used to explore complex ideas. The story of Atlantis, with its perfect social structure and its dramatic, moralistic ending, fits this pattern perfectly. It's a compelling way to talk about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of virtue. For these scholars, looking for a physical Atlantis is a waste of time, like looking for the house of the three little pigs. However, a small but dedicated group of researchers believes there's a kernel of truth in the story. They argue that Plato was an honest historian, and that his account of Atlantis was based on a real event that happened long before his time, perhaps passed down through generations of oral tradition. The fact that he gave such specific details about the city's location and its inhabitants is, to them, a sign that he wasn't just making it up. The fact that the story has resonated with so many people over so many centuries is, to them, a sign of its power and its truth. The search for Atlantis is a fascinating case study in how we interact with history. It's a story that tells us more about ourselves than it does about the past. We want to believe in lost worlds, in forgotten civilizations, in a time when humans were more noble, more powerful, more in tune with nature. The idea of Atlantis taps into our deepest desires and our most powerful anxieties. The fear of losing everything we've built, the hope of a world that was once perfect. So, as you drift off, think about the lost city of Atlantis. Think about the mythical island, the beautiful palaces, the hubris of its people, and its ultimate destruction. And wonder, just for a moment, if it's truly just a myth, or if a piece of it, some small fragment of a golden age, is still waiting to be discovered, buried somewhere deep beneath the silent sea. From the mythical depths of Atlantis, we surface to a more tangible, but no less tragic mystery, the fate of the Great Library of Alexandria. Settle in, and let's go back to the 3rd century BC. You're a scholar in Alexandria, Egypt, a bustling metropolis, and the intellectual heart of the Hellenistic world. You walk through the city, past the lighthouse, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and toward a magnificent building, the Great Library. This isn't just a place to store books, it's a temple of knowledge, a university, and a research centre all in one. It holds an estimated 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls, and scholars from all over the known world come here to study, to debate, and to push the boundaries of human understanding. The Library of Alexandria was a mainstream historical fact, an institution that truly existed and was the envy of the world. It was a place where Archimedes studied, where Euclid wrote his Elements, and where the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, was produced. But then a cloud of mystery descends. The library, which was once the symbol of intellectual prowess, simply vanishes. The story we're often told, the one that has become a staple of popular culture, is that it was destroyed in a single, catastrophic fire. The villain of this tale is often portrayed as Julius Caesar, who in 48 BC was besieging the city and accidentally set fire to a fleet of Egyptian ships, a fire that then spread to the library and burned it to the ground. This is a dramatic, tragic, and deeply appealing narrative. It's a story of a single devastating event that wiped out a priceless collection of human knowledge. However, as is often the case with history, the truth is far more complex and far less cinematic. The fire in 48 BC was likely just one of several events that contributed to the library's decline, and it may not have even been a fire at all. Roman historians from the time mentioned that Caesar's fire destroyed a massive warehouse of scrolls, but they did not explicitly state that it was the main library itself. This is a crucial distinction. The library was a massive complex of buildings, and it's highly unlikely that a fire from the harbour would have destroyed the entire collection. So what really happened? The truth is, the Great Library of Alexandria was not destroyed in a single fiery blaze. It died a slow, agonising death of neglect, decay, and a series of smaller, more insidious acts of destruction over several centuries. This brings us to the open scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria was destroyed in a single event, or if it simply declined over time. The latter theory is now the most widely accepted in academic circles. Following Caesar's fire, the library was still a functioning institution, albeit a diminished one. It was slowly rebuilt and restocked, but it never regained its former glory. Then came a series of subsequent attacks and conflicts. The Roman Emperor Aurelian's sack of Alexandria in 272 AD, and the Christian mob's destruction of pagan temples in 391 AD, which included the destruction of a subsidiary library called the Serapeum, were significant blows. The final nail in the coffin was probably the Arab conquest of Alexandria in 642 AD. The story, a popular but likely apocryphal one, is that the Arab general ordered the scrolls to be burned, saying, "If the books agree with the Quran, they are not necessary, and if they disagree, they are not to be tolerated." While this story is almost certainly a legend, it perfectly encapsulates the attitude of a world that had moved on from classical antiquity. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the idea that a significant portion of the library's collection was not destroyed at all, but was instead taken and scattered across the Roman and Byzantine empires, or even secretly moved to places like Baghdad and Constantinople. The idea is that the knowledge wasn't lost, just moved and redistributed. This is a romantic notion, but there's very little evidence to back it up. The fact is, the vast majority of the scrolls were likely lost to time, to fire, to neglect, and to a changing world that no longer valued the old ways. Think about what we lost. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the great Greek tragedians, were said to have had their complete works housed in the library. We have only a fraction of their plays today. There were lost works of mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. We have no idea what secrets were contained in those scrolls, what discoveries were made, and what intellectual progress was set back by centuries. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria is a tragedy not because of the fire, but because of the slow, grinding erosion of knowledge that we can never get back. The Library of Alexandria is a perfect ghost story. It's a phantom limb of knowledge, a reminder of what we once had and what we lost. It's a humbling thought that an institution that was the pinnacle of human achievement could simply disappear, not in a bang, but with a whimper. And in the end, the question isn't about who destroyed it, but about why we let it happen. It's a powerful lesson, a testament to the fragility of knowledge and the importance of preserving the past for the future. We've explored the silent, slow death of knowledge in ancient Alexandria. Now, let's fast forward to a mystery of the modern world, a story that begins on a quiet beach and ends in a question mark. Imagine you're a passerby walking on Somerton Park Beach in Adelaide, Australia, on the morning of December 1st, 1948. It's a beautiful day, the sun is shining, and you see a well-dressed man lying on the sand leaning against the sea wall. He's dressed in a suit and tie, his shoes are polished, and his body is perfectly still. He looks like he's sleeping, but something feels off. This is the Somerton Man, and his death is one of Australia's most enduring unsolved mysteries. When police arrive, they find a man of about 40 to 45 years old, in good physical condition, and with no visible signs of injury. His clothing has all the labels removed, and his pockets contain a few strange items: a ticket to a train he never took, a pack of chewing gum, a pack of cigarettes, and a box of matches. There's no wallet, no money, and no form of identification. The man is completely anonymous. The post-mortem examination reveals something even stranger. The man's internal organs are congested, suggesting poisoning, but no trace of poison can be found in his system. This is a perplexing medical fact that has baffled forensic pathologists for decades. The case gets even weirder when a few months later, a tiny, rolled-up piece of paper is found in a hidden pocket sewn into the man's trousers. The paper contains a phrase, a single cryptic clue, tamam shud. The phrase is Persian for the end, and it is the final line of a collection of poems called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Police, in a stroke of luck, find a rare copy of the book that the paper was torn from. The book is found in the back seat of an unlocked car near the beach, and it contains 5 lines of what appears to be a secret code, or perhaps a series of phone numbers written on the back cover. The code has never been deciphered. This is the central, unshakable mainstream fact of the case. A man was found dead with a cryptic note that led to an even more cryptic book. The identity of the Somerton man and the circumstances of his death are a subject of intense historical and cultural debate. The most widely accepted theory is that he was a spy, a Cold War operative who either committed suicide or was poisoned by a rival agent. This theory is supported by the meticulous way in which all identifying marks were removed from his clothing, the hidden pocket, and the secret code. The fact that he was found with no wallet or money suggests he was not a common traveller. The Tamam Shud note, and the connection to a rare copy of a Persian poetry book, adds a layer of intrigue that feels straight out of a John le Carré novel. But as with all good mysteries, there's a more mundane, and perhaps more likely explanation. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the theory that the man was a spurned lover, someone who was heartbroken and took his own life. The poem, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, is a book of verse about love, life, and death, and its final line, the end, could be a note of finality. The fact that the man's body showed no signs of struggle, and that he was found in a relaxed position, could be consistent with a quiet suicide. But this theory doesn't explain the secret code, the lack of identification, or the fact that no poison was found. This brings us to the open scholarly debate. Historians and forensic experts still argue whether the Somerton man was a spy, a victim of a crime of passion, or a person with a mental illness who simply wandered onto the beach to die. A recent development in the case has added a new layer of complexity. In 2022, a professor named Derek Abbott, who has been working on the case for years, claimed to have identified the man as a man named Carl Charles Webb, a man who lived in the area at the time of the death. Abbott used a hair from the bust of the man and DNA testing to make a familial link to a person named Rachel, who was a close relative of Webb's. This new development, if confirmed by a full DNA analysis, would solve the case and would likely discredit the spy theory. But until it's officially verified, the mystery remains. Think about the sheer strangeness of the case. A man with no name, no past and no future, found dead on a beach with a single, unreadable message and a book of poetry. It's a perfect microcosm of a mystery, a single, baffling event that raises 100 questions and provides no answers. It's a case that has fascinated generations of people because it's a story we can all relate to in a way. The fear of being lost and alone, of dying with a secret that will never be told. The Somerton man is a modern ghost, a silent figure on a beach, a testament to the fact that some riddles are meant to be kept forever. From the modern, anonymous mystery of the Somerton man, we now travel to a far more ancient and deeply spiritual one. Settle back and imagine you're standing in a chapel in Turin, Italy. In a glass case, under a dim light, lies a piece of linen cloth, a large rectangular piece of fabric about 14 feet long. The cloth is yellowed with age and covered in stains and burns from centuries of handling and fires. But what is truly remarkable is what's on it. The faint, ghostly image of a man, front and back, as if he were laid out on the cloth. His face is gaunt, his hands are crossed, and there are what appear to be bloodstains on his head, his hands, and his side. This is the Shroud of Turin, and it is one of the most famous and controversial religious artifacts in the world. The faithful believe the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, the very fabric that was wrapped around his body after his crucifixion. This is a powerful, deeply held belief, and for millions of people, the shroud is a living testament to their faith. The image on the cloth, which appears to be a negative, that is, the light and dark areas are reversed, is a subject of intense scientific and spiritual scrutiny. It is a mainstream historical fact that the shroud exists. It has been housed in Turin since 1578, and it has been the subject of countless scientific studies. The question is not whether it is real, but whether it is authentic. The image itself is a source of great debate. Some scientists believe it was created by a unique burst of light or radiation from a resurrected body, an event that would have singed the image onto the fibres of the cloth. Others believe it was created by a physical process, perhaps a chemical reaction between the cloth and the body, or a powder rubbed onto the fabric. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the idea that the image was created with a camera obscura, a kind of ancient photographic device. This theory, while intriguing, has been largely dismissed by experts who point out the lack of anatomical correctness in the image and the unique way the fibres of the cloth are altered. The most significant event in the shroud's modern history was the 1988 radiocarbon dating test. 3 separate laboratories in Oxford, Zurich and Arizona were given small samples of the shroud. Their independent results all came back with the same conclusion. The linen dated to the Middle Ages, between 1260 and 1390 AD. This, according to the scientific community, was the nail in the coffin. The shroud, they said, was a medieval forgery, a beautiful and clever piece of art created to bilk pilgrims and generate revenue for the church. The scientific consensus is that the shroud is not the burial cloth of Christ. However, the story does not end there. A counter-argument has been put forward by a group of scientists and historians who argue that the 1988 test was flawed. This is the central, open, scholarly debate. Historians and scientists still argue whether the 1988 radiocarbon dating test was accurate, or if the Shroud of Turin is a genuine relic. The counter-argument is based on a number of factors. First, the sample that was used for the test came from a corner of the cloth, a section that may have been a patch added later during a medieval repair. This patch, they argue, was what was dated, not the original fabric. Second, they point out that centuries of fires and human handling could have contaminated the cloth with carbon-14, which would have skewed the dating results. A fringe theory suggests that the heat from a fire would have essentially recarbonized the cloth, giving a false younger date. This is a contentious claim, but it's one that a small group of scientists takes seriously. Think about the sheer audacity of a medieval forger who could create such a convincing image without any knowledge of photography. The image itself has features that are anatomically correct for a man who's been crucified, and the blood stains on the cloth have been shown to be consistent with human blood. The image is a negative, a concept that was completely unknown to medieval artists. How could a forger have created a negative image that would only become a positive image when a photograph was taken of it centuries later? This is a question that the forgery theory has a hard time answering. The Shroud of Turin is a powerful example of the conflict between faith and science. For the faithful, no scientific test, no matter how convincing, can disprove what they believe to be a miracle. For the skeptics, no amount of convoluted theory can undo the evidence of a radiocarbon dating test. The shroud remains a mystery because it is a question that cannot be answered by a single discipline. It requires us to grapple with questions of belief, of evidence, and of the nature of truth itself. The shroud is a silent testament to a story that has shaped the course of human history. Whether it's the burial cloth of a prophet or a masterful work of medieval art, it is a fascinating artifact that continues to challenge our assumptions about the past. It's a physical manifestation of a question mark, a puzzle that has resisted all attempts at a final solution. From the holy and ancient mysteries of the shroud, we return to the modern era, to a different kind of legend, one of missing ships and planes. A place where the laws of nature seem to bend and break. Settle in, and let your mind drift to a patch of ocean in the western part of the North Atlantic. It's a vast, triangular region bounded roughly by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. This is the Bermuda Triangle, and its reputation for being a place of unexplained disappearances is a mainstream historical fact. For over a century, a litany of ships and planes have vanished in this area, leaving behind no wreckage, no distress calls, and no logical explanation. The legend of the Bermuda Triangle is a modern one, largely popularised by writers in the 1960s and 70s. But the disappearances themselves go back much further. One of the earliest and most famous cases is the USS Cyclops, a US Navy fuel ship that disappeared in 1918 with 306 crew members on board. The ship simply vanished, and a search of a vast area found no trace of it. Then, in 1945, a group of 5 US Navy bombers, known as Flight 19, disappeared while on a training mission. Their flight leader reported that his compasses were malfunctioning, and he couldn't tell which way was west. A search plane was sent to find them, and it also vanished, never to be seen again. This single event, with 6 planes disappearing in a matter of hours, cemented the Bermuda Triangle's reputation as a place of paranormal activity. For decades, countless theories have been proposed to explain these disappearances. Some are grounded in science, while others venture into the realm of the supernatural. The mainstream scientific explanation is that the Bermuda Triangle is a myth, a product of sensationalized reporting and a misunderstanding of statistics. This is the central, open, scholarly debate. Historians and scientists still argue whether the Bermuda Triangle is a place of genuine mystery or a manufactured legend. Skeptics point out that the number of disappearances in the Triangle is not statistically higher than in any other equally travelled part of the ocean. They argue that many of the stories of missing ships and planes are either exaggerated, a product of sloppy journalism, or simply made up. They point out that a distress call may not have been heard for a variety of reasons, and that a plane or ship sinking in the open ocean often leaves no trace, especially in rough seas. But where's the fun in that? The lack of a simple explanation has led to some truly bizarre and quirky fringe tidbits. One of the most popular is the theory of methane hydrates. The seabed in the area is known to contain vast quantities of frozen methane gas, which can be released in a sudden, violent eruption. This would create a large bubble of gas on the surface, which would reduce the water's density to the point that a ship would lose its buoyancy and sink instantly. A plane flying over a large column of methane gas would experience engine failure due to the lack of oxygen. It's a compelling theory, and it's one that is being taken more seriously as a potential explanation for some of the disappearances. Other theories are more outlandish. Some have suggested that the disappearances are caused by rogue waves, or a type of electronic fog that confuses instruments and pilots, or even a time vortex that transports the ships and planes to another dimension. The most common and enduring theory, however, is that the disappearances are caused by extraluminal or extraterrestrial activity. The idea that the Bermuda Triangle is a kind of gateway for aliens or some other supernatural force is a powerful and popular one, and it's a testament to the human desire to find a mysterious explanation for things we can't understand. The mainstream historical fact is that many of the disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle were later found to have perfectly logical explanations. The USS Cyclops, for example, was an aging ship with a history of mechanical problems, and it likely sank in a severe storm. Flight 19's leader was known to have a history of disorientation, and the planes, which were not equipped with the best navigation systems, likely ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. The search plane was also a known model with a history of exploding in mid-air. The mystery in many cases is not what happened, but why we so desperately want to believe in a paranormal explanation. The Bermuda Triangle is a perfect example of how a few unexplained events, when amplified by the media and a few imaginative writers, can create a legend that is more powerful than the facts. It is a story that has captured the imagination of generations of people and has become a modern myth. It's a testament to the power of a good story, and the human need to believe that there is still magic in the world, even in a world where every corner of the planet has been mapped and every secret has been for the most part uncovered. From the watery depths of the Bermuda Triangle, we turn now to a mystery that is far more human and far more bizarre. A spontaneous outburst of uncontrollable dancing that killed people. Settle in and let your mind travel to the summer of 1518 in the city of Strasbourg, in what is now modern-day France. The city is bustling with life, but then a woman named Frau Trophea walks into the street and begins to dance. Not a joyful celebratory dance, but a frantic, unyielding and seemingly involuntary jig. She doesn't stop. She dances for hours, then days, and soon other people begin to join her. This is the dancing plague of 1518, and it is a terrifying, perplexing historical fact. The dancing spread like a contagion, first to a few people, then dozens, then hundreds. Within a month, an estimated 400 people were dancing in the streets, and they couldn't stop. They danced until they collapsed from exhaustion, heart attacks, or strokes. For a while, the authorities thought the dancing was a form of mass hysteria, a strange religious frenzy. The local doctors, believing the plague was caused by hot blood, prescribed more dancing as a cure, building stages and even hiring musicians to keep the dancers moving. The logic was that if they danced it out, they would be cured. The strategy, as you can imagine, backfired spectacularly. The dancing only intensified, and the death toll rose. The medical and historical communities have struggled to explain this event for centuries. It's a real documented historical fact, mentioned in local records and chronicles from the time. The death toll is a matter of some debate, but it is clear that people did die from the dancing. The question is, why? This is the central, open, scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the dancing plague was a case of mass psychogenic illness or was caused by a natural phenomenon. The most widely accepted theory in modern science is that it was a mass psychogenic illness, a kind of mass hysteria. This is a phenomenon where a group of people, under extreme stress or anxiety, begin to exhibit the same physical symptoms without a clear medical cause. The people of Strasbourg in 1518 were living under a great deal of duress. They were impoverished, starving, and living in fear of disease. The Black Death had only recently ravaged Europe, and people were deeply superstitious and fearful of the future. The dancing, according to this theory, was a psychological outlet for all this pent-up stress and anxiety. It was a kind of a mental breakdown on a citywide scale. The fact that the dancing spread from person to person suggests a kind of social contagion, a phenomenon that we still see today in places like schools or workplaces. However, a quirky or fringe tidbit from a different field of study suggests a different cause. A fungus called Claviceps purpurea, which grows on rye and other grains. This fungus, when ingested, can cause a condition known as St. Anthony's fire or ergotism. The symptoms of ergotism can include convulsions, muscle spasms, hallucinations and manic behaviour, all of which would be consistent with the dancing plague. The fungus thrives in warm, damp conditions, and the summer of 1518 was known to be humid and rainy. It's a compelling theory, as it offers a physical rather than a psychological explanation for the events. The problem is that the symptoms of ergotism also include gangrene, which was not reported among the dancers. But it's a tantalising possibility. Think about the sheer surrealism of the scene, a city of people dancing in the street to the point of death. It sounds like something out of a horror movie. It's a powerful reminder that our bodies and minds are capable of things that we can't fully understand, and that a single, unexplained event can be a window into a world of human psychology and physical phenomena that we've yet to fully grasp. The dancing plague is not a myth. It is a profound historical enigma that tells us something about the fragile state of the human mind under pressure. The mystery of the dancing plague is a sobering thought. It shows us that for all our advancements in science and medicine, there are still events in our past that we can't fully explain. It's a testament to the power of a single idea, a single action, to spread and take on a life of its own, with deadly consequences. And it's a great story, a terrifying and bizarre piece of history that has no easy answer. From the collective madness of the dancing plague, we turn to the cold, calculated terror of a single, unidentified murderer. Settle in, and let your mind drift to the year 1888. You're a resident of the Whitechapel district of London, a poor, grimy and overcrowded neighbourhood filled with poverty, vice and a gnawing sense of fear. Over the course of a few months, a series of brutal murders of prostitutes shocks the city. The killer's methods are so gruesome, and the victims are so defenceless, that the public is gripped by a terrifying fascination. The killer is never caught, and the case becomes a global phenomenon. The killer is given a name, Jack the Ripper. This is the central, unshakable mainstream historical fact. A serial killer operated in London in 1888, and his identity has never been confirmed. The murders, known as the Canonical Five, were those of Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. All were poor women, and all were killed in a similar horrific manner. The police investigation at the time was chaotic and disorganised. The fledgling science of forensic pathology was in its infancy, and the police had no idea how to handle a serial killer case. The killer was a ghost, a phantom who stalked the dark alleys of London and then vanished without a trace. The mystery of Jack the Ripper's identity has spawned a cottage industry of theories, books, documentaries, and even a new field of study called ripperology. The list of suspects is long and diverse, and it includes everyone from royalty to a well-known painter. This is the central, open, scholarly debate. Historians and forensic scientists still argue over the identity of Jack the Ripper, with dozens of suspects and a lack of definitive evidence. The lack of a clear suspect and the passage of time have allowed for a flood of compelling, but ultimately unprovable theories. The most famous suspects are a who's who of Victorian England. There's Prince Albert Victor, the Duke of Clarence, who was the grandson of Queen Victoria. The theory is that he contracted syphilis and went mad, committing the murders in a fit of rage. Another popular suspect is the painter Walter Sickert, a man who was fascinated by the murders and who even painted a series of works based on the scenes. The theory is that he was a sociopath who created the paintings as a kind of twisted confession. Another suspect is a Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski, a man with a history of mental illness who was identified by a key witness but who was never formally charged. There are a dozen more suspects, but none of them can be definitively linked to the crimes. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the idea that the killer wasn't a man at all but a woman. The theory, known as the Jill the Ripper theory, suggests that the killer was a midwife, who would have had the necessary medical knowledge and would have been able to walk the streets at night without arousing suspicion. This theory, while intriguing, lacks any definitive evidence. Another fringe theory is that the killer was a member of the royal family, a theory that has been widely discredited by historians. The fact is, we may never know who Jack the Ripper was. All the potential suspects are long dead, and the forensic evidence from the time is unreliable. The DNA on the letters and the artefacts from the crime scenes is likely to be contaminated, and even if a match were found, it would not be a definitive proof of guilt. The mystery of Jack the Ripper is a perfect example of how a lack of answers can create a legend that is more powerful than any truth. It's a story that has captured the imagination of generations of people because it is a story of a phantom, a killer who lived and died in the shadows and whose identity will likely remain a secret forever. The mystery is a testament to the power of a good story. It's a terrifying and captivating puzzle that has resisted all attempts at a final solution. And it's a powerful reminder that some questions in history are simply unanswerable. As you drift off to sleep, think about the gaslit streets of London, the fog that rolled in from the Thames, and the figure of a man who walked those streets and left a trail of blood, a trail that we are still trying to follow to this day. From the dark, gaslit alleys of London, we rise above the earth to see a mystery etched into the very ground itself. Settle in and let your mind drift to the arid plains of the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. It's a hot, dry and unforgiving landscape, but when you look down from a high place, you see something extraordinary. A series of enormous geoglyphs, ancient etchings in the sand, of animals, plants and geometric shapes. These are the Nazca Lines, and they are a perplexing, beautiful and deeply baffling historical fact. The Nazca Lines were created by the ancient Nazca culture, who flourished in the region from about 100 BC to 800 AD. The drawings are so massive that they can only be fully appreciated from the air, and they cover an area of nearly 450 square kilometres. The figures are made by removing the reddish-brown stones and gravel on the surface to expose the lighter-coloured soil beneath. The figures are immense, with some of the longest lines stretching for miles, and the animal figures, which include a monkey, a hummingbird, a spider and a condor, are sometimes over 100 metres long. The climate of the Nazca Desert is so dry and windless that the lines have been preserved for centuries, a silent testament to a lost civilization. The existence of the Nazca Lines is a mainstream historical fact, but their purpose is the subject of intense, often heated debate. This is the central, open, scholarly debate. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether the Nazca Lines were created for astronomical, religious, or purely artistic reasons. The most popular theory is that the lines were created for religious purposes, as a kind of open-air temple or a series of ceremonial walking paths. The drawings of the animals and plants, which were sacred to the Nazca people, would have been used in rituals to honour the gods and to ask for rain, a precious commodity in the arid desert. The fact that the figures are so large and can only be fully appreciated from the air suggests that they were meant for the gods to see, a kind of cosmic prayer. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the idea that the Nazca Lines were created as a kind of celestial calendar or an astronomical almanac. The German mathematician Maria Reicher, who dedicated her life to studying the lines, believed that they pointed to the sunrise and sunset on the summer and winter solstices, and that the figures represented constellations. Her work, while influential, has been largely dismissed by modern archaeologists, who have found no definitive correlation between the lines and the movements of the stars. The idea that they were a kind of calendar is a romantic one, but it's not supported by the evidence. Another, even more outlandish fringe theory is that the lines were created by aliens, or were a kind of landing strip for extraterrestrial visitors. This theory was popularized by the Swiss author Erich von Däniken in his book Chariots of the Gods. He argued that the Nazca people, who had no knowledge of flight, could not have created such large and complex figures without help from a more advanced civilization. This theory, while fun to think about, has no scientific or archaeological evidence to support it, and it's a testament to the human tendency to look for a mysterious explanation when a simple one doesn't present itself. The mainstream historical fact is that the lines were created by a sophisticated and highly organised society. The Nazca people were masters of irrigation and farming, and they had a complex culture with a rich religious life. The sheer scale and precision of the lines suggest a society that was capable of a high degree of social organisation and a deep understanding of geometry. The fact that they were able to create such a thing without the benefit of a plane or a drone is a testament to their ingenuity. The riddle of the Nazca lines is a powerful reminder that our ancestors were far more clever than we often give them credit for. It's a silent, sprawling, and profoundly strange monument that sits in the middle of a desert, asking us a question we may never be able to answer. What were you thinking, Nazca people? What message were you trying to send, and to whom? The Nazca lines are a perfect ghost story. They are a physical manifestation of a lost civilization, a silent message from the past that we can see but can't read. They challenge us to think about our place in the universe and our relationship with the past. And they remind us that for all our technology, there are still things on this planet that we can't fully understand. From the ancient riddles etched into a desert floor, we land squarely in the middle of a modern conspiracy, one that unfolds in an American city on a single, fateful day. Settle in and let your mind drift to the streets of Dallas, Texas, on November the 22nd, 1963. The day is sunny and crisp, and the atmosphere is electric with anticipation. You're standing among a crowd of people, all cheering for the motorcade of President John F. Kennedy. You see the president and his wife, Jackie, waving from the back of the limousine. You feel the excitement in the air. Then the shots ring out. Chaos erupts. The car speeds away, and a terrible realization dawns on you. In the aftermath, as investigators and journalists pore over photos and films of the assassination, a peculiar figure emerges. In a number of different frames, a woman can be seen standing near the president's motorcade in a prime viewing spot. She's dressed in a long tan overcoat and a headscarf, a style that was popular in Russia at the time, earning her the nickname the Babushka Lady. What makes her so important is not her presence, but what she is doing. In the photos and films, she appears to be holding a camera to her face, filming the motorcade at the exact moment the shots were fired. As the crowd disperses in a panic, she remains still, her camera still raised. She's then seen walking away from the scene and disappearing into the crowd, never to be seen again. This is the central, unshakable mainstream historical fact of the Babushka Lady. A woman was present at the assassination of JFK, filming the event, and she has never been positively identified. Her presence has been documented in multiple photos and films, including the famous Zapruder film. The FBI and the Warren Commission, which investigated the assassination, attempted to identify her, but they were unsuccessful. Her film, which would have been an invaluable piece of evidence, has never surfaced. The mystery of the Babushka Lady is a perfect example of how a single, unexplained event can fuel decades of conspiracy theories. The central question is, who was she, and where is her film? This is the central, open scholarly debate. Historians and assassination theorists still argue whether the Babushka Lady was an innocent witness or an accomplice to the assassination. The conspiracy theorists point to a number of perplexing facts. She was standing in a location that offered an ideal vantage point, and she remained calm and collected while those around her were running for cover. The fact that she never came forward, or that her film was never found, is to them a sign that she was part of the plot. Perhaps she was a spy, or a part of a larger coordinated effort to film the assassination for a mysterious party. The film, if it exists, could contain the definitive proof of a conspiracy. The mainstream skeptical view is that the Babushka Lady was just what she appeared to be, an ordinary person who was caught in an extraordinary moment. The fact that she didn't run away could be explained by shock, or by a desire to get a good shot of the president, even as the chaos unfolded. The fact that her film never surfaced could be explained by the fact that it was damaged in the chaos, or that she was too afraid to come forward. It was a time of immense social and political upheaval, and a person with a film of the assassination, especially a woman, may have been too intimidated to hand it over to the authorities. This theory is less exciting, but it's far more plausible. A quirky or fringe tidbit is a woman named Beverly Oliver, who in the 1970s claimed that she was the babushka lady. She said that her camera was a low-quality camera, and that a man who claimed to be from the FBI had confiscated her film. She was unable to prove her story, and her account was riddled with inconsistencies. Most historians and investigators dismiss her claim. Another theory is that the babushka lady was a man dressed as a woman, a kind of spy in disguise. This is a far-fetched but fun idea, and it's a testament to the level of detail that people have gone to in their attempts to solve the case. The mystery of the babushka lady is a microcosm of the JFK assassination itself. It is a puzzle with a single crucial missing piece. Her film, if it exists, would be a holy grail of evidence, and it could solve the case once and for all. But it may have never existed in the first place, or it may be sitting in a box in someone's attic, a silent witness to one of the most tragic events in American history. The babushka lady is a perfect ghost story. She's a figure in the background of history, a silent witness who holds a secret that we may never know. She reminds us that for all the thousands of hours of film, for all the millions of words that have been written about the assassination, there are still things that we don't know, things that are just out of our reach, and in the end, it is her silence that speaks the loudest. From the political chaos of the JFK assassination, we come to a different kind of American mystery, one that begins in the sky and ends in the wind. Settle in and let your mind drift to the year 1971. You're a passenger on a Boeing 727, a flight from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. The flight is routine, uneventful. But then, a man in the last row, a passenger who gave his name as Dan Cooper, calmly hands a flight attendant a note. The note says he has a bomb. He opens his briefcase and shows her a tangle of wires and red sticks. He's calm, polite, and completely in control. He tells the flight attendant his demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting in Seattle. This is the beginning of the most famous unsolved skyjacking in history. The plane lands in Seattle, the passengers are released, and the ransom and parachutes are delivered. The plane is refueled, and Cooper, who now insists on being called DB Cooper, directs the crew to fly to Mexico City, at a slow speed and a low altitude. But somewhere over the dense forested wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, Cooper opens the rear stairwell of the plane, and in the dead of a cold, rainy night, he jumps. He jumps into the wind and the darkness, and he's never seen again. He simply vanishes. This is the central, unshakable mainstream historical fact. A man calling himself DB Cooper hijacked a plane, collected a ransom, and parachuted into the night, never to be heard from again. The FBI launched one of the largest and most extensive manhunts in its history. They scoured the woods, the rivers, and the mountains of Oregon and Washington. They followed every lead, investigated every tip, and interviewed every possible suspect. But they found nothing. No body, no parachute, no briefcase, no sign of the man himself. For all intents and purposes, DB Cooper was a ghost. The case has been a source of endless fascination for decades, and it has spawned a cottage industry of theories, books, and documentaries. The central question is, what happened to him? This is the central, open, scholarly debate. Historians and law enforcement officials still argue whether DB Cooper survived the jump or died in the wilderness. The most widely accepted theory is that he died. The jump was a high-risk maneuver. The weather was terrible. He jumped into a thick forest at night, and he was not an experienced paratrooper. He jumped in a suit and loafers, with a briefcase full of money. The odds of him surviving the jump and then navigating his way out of the wilderness with a bag of cash are, to most experts, close to zero. The fact that no one ever spent the marked bills from the ransom is, to many, definitive proof that he did not survive. However, a quirky or fringe tidbit from a different field of study suggests a different outcome. In 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was on a camping trip with his family in Washington state. While digging in the sand near the Columbia River, he found a bundle of old, decaying money. The bills were later identified as part of the ransom money that was given to Cooper. This is a perplexing and baffling piece of evidence. It suggests that Cooper did survive the jump, or at least that he landed somewhere where the money could have washed up in the river. It's a tantalizing clue that has fueled decades of speculation. Why did he only find a few $1,000s? Where is the rest? And how did it get there? This brings us to a few of the more outlandish theories. One is that DB, Cooper, was a highly experienced Special Forces operative, a man who had the skills to survive the jump and disappear without a trace. This is a romantic and compelling idea, but there's no evidence to support it. Another theory is that he was a man named Richard McCoy, a former paratrooper who was a near-perfect match for the Cooper sketch, and who committed a similar skyjacking a few years later. He was the subject of an intense FBI investigation, but he was never formally charged with the Cooper case. He always denied his involvement. Another theory, a truly quirky one, is that the jump was a suicide, and that the man never intended to survive, and that the money and the parachutes were just a final bizarre act. This theory, while interesting, doesn't explain the note, the meticulous planning, or the fact that no body was ever found. The case of D.B. Cooper is a perfect modern ghost story. It's a story of a phantom, a man who appeared out of nowhere, committed a crime, and then vanished. It's a testament to the power of a single audacious act to capture the imagination of a nation. The fact that the case remains unsolved, and that no one has ever been able to definitively say what happened to him, is a testament to the human desire to believe that some mysteries, some crimes, can be perfectly executed. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016, but for the millions of people who have followed the story for decades, the case is far from closed. The mystery of D.B. Cooper is a perfect microcosm of our fascination with the unknown. It's a story that tells us something about ourselves, about our desire for adventure, our belief in the underdog, and our hope that some secrets can remain a secret forever. And in the end, the question isn't about who he was, but about why he did it. And that, my friend, is a question we may never be able to answer. And so, we come to the end of our journey, a long and winding path through history's quietest corners and most thunderous moments. We have stood on a bluff in Siberia and watched a cosmic boom flatten a forest. We have held a small, perplexing disk of clay in our hands, a message from a lost civilization that we can't read. We have walked the battlefield of a vanished Roman legion and heard the whispered name of a ghost. We have felt the chill of an unexplained silence over the Pacific and the terror of a spontaneous plague of dancing. We have stared into the face of an unsolved crime and looked for a phantom on a beach. We have seen a monument that spoke to a secret society and a man who jumped into the night and disappeared. It's a lot to take in, I know, a world full of secrets and riddles. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? The not knowing, the quiet hum of a question that has no answer. It is in these moments of silence, in these empty spaces on the historical map, that our imaginations have the most room to play. The stories of these mysteries are not just about what we don't know. They're about what we do know about ourselves, our desire to solve a puzzle, our need for a good story, our fascination with the unknown. So now, as you lay in the stillness of your room, let these mysteries settle in your mind. The riddles of the past are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt. They are a quiet, reassuring reminder that there is still magic in the world, still things that are just beyond our grasp. The past is not a finished book. It is a book with many missing pages and a few with words we can't read. And that, I think, is a wonderful and beautiful thing.